Hello and welcome to the Life to the Full podcast, the podcast that helps you make the most of your time here on Earth. I'm your host, Dav Morse, and I am here once again to bring some beautiful wisdom to your little ear holes. We've spent the last few weeks looking at financial health, physical health, mental health, and today we are going to be looking at relational health. What does it mean to have good, healthy relationships? Why is it important? And generally, just have a good time, you know? There should be plenty of wisdom to take away, actionable takeaways, things you can put into practice in your own life. Wait for it. There it is. Okay, let's get started. It is not good for man to be alone. Or, as Jon Bon Jovi once said, no man is an island. We're going to look today at relational health. Why is it so important? Now, sooner or later, you'll realize that relationships are the most important thing that we can give our energy to. Wherever we are in our stage of life, we can probably look back and we can see the value of relationships in our life. We can see now the value of relationships even more clearly than we could a few years ago. Relationships are important. Pop culture knows it. Research knows it. Science knows it. In a 2002 film called About a Boy, starring Hugh Grant, we see this man who's 38 and he lives alone and he's got no close friends, no life partner, no immediate family around him. He just does everything on his own. He just goes out, spends time on his own, has his haircut on his own, plays pool on his own, watches DVDs, listens to CDs on his own, and doesn't really have much of a relationship with anyone. And then all of a sudden this 12-year-old boy who's getting absolutely rinsed at school, bullied left, right and centre, they end up crossing paths, and the film is all about how these two kind of help each other to discover that there's a little bit more to life than just living on your own. This is what Marcus says in the film. This is the 12-year-old Marcus talking about his mother. I've tried making myself happy, and she's tried making herself happy, but it just doesn't work. You need other people to make you happy. In the film, there's a scene where Marcus's mother confronts him in a restaurant. And she says, "What are you doing with my son? Why are you hanging out with this 12-year-old kid?" "No man is an island," it ends up saying. And Hugh Grant responds with, "I'm an island. I'm bloody Ibiza." I might have to bleep that out. Or stick E for explicit. We'll see. And he thinks of himself as a complete island. I don't want to spoil the film for you. I'm sure you can see where it's all going. He realizes that actually making somebody else happy makes yourself happy. Putting yourself out there and forming relationships with other people makes your life more worth living. It brings meaning and purpose to your life. Research knows it, why relational health is so important. There's a chap called Dan Buettner, who's a journalist for the National Geographic and the New York Times best-selling author, and he popularized this concept of the blue zones. The blue zones are areas across the world where people seem to live longer and happier and more fulfilled lives. And he looked and he studied these areas across the globe, and there was a few things that they all had in common. They all moved regularly, not just once a day run, but they had regular movement in their lives. We talked about that on an earlier episode. Go back and listen to that if you haven't already. Second thing is they have social support from their friends and family. His research shows that having the support of friends and family is a key ingredient into living a long and happy life. The third thing he talks about in his Blue Zones, what causes people to live happier and healthier lives, is living with a purpose. And we'll come back to that next week. The other thing is lesser understood. Make the healthy choice the easiest choice. Make the healthiest choice the easiest choice. I think that deserves an episode in itself. Science knows it. There's a book called The Neuroscience of Human Relationships by Louis Cozolino. In that book, he says this: without mutually stimulating interactions, people and neurons wither and die. In neurons, it's called apoptosis. In humans, it's depression and suicide. The importance of mentally stimulating interactions with people is scientifically proven. We need other people. We weren't designed to be islands. We are designed to live in relationship with one another. I'm not just talking about an exclusive, intimate relationship. I'm talking more generally here about relationships with all sorts of people, colleagues, friends, family, extended family. In that book, he also says, neurons that fire together wire together. So people who are able to attend to one another, touch each other and connect together, also fire together, wire together, and survive together. When we do things, we experience things with other people, it brings us closer in relationship. When we are in relationship with each other, we have an opportunity to sharpen each other, to encourage each other, to shape each other, and to be molded by each other, and to grow together. Now, nowhere is more evident than in a marriage relationship. And I thought I'd just open up a little bit about some of the things that marriage has taught me. You might think, after the end of this podcast, that don't want to listen to this guy talking about relational health anymore. He doesn't have a clue. But I would say that I have learned a lot over the last 15 years. I used to say I'm this deep. You can't see that because it's a podcast, but I'm holding my fingers about a centimetre apart from each other. I said I don't have any emotions. I don't have any depth to my character. What you see is what you get. And I think to some extent that probably was true. But I'm grateful and thankful to my wife, Rachel, who has taught me the importance of emotion, the importance of feeling. I used to think that emotions were just things that would get in the way of rational thought, but more and more I am understanding that they are a way to connect with people. If I share my emotions, it's a way of connecting me to you. Growing with someone is one of the most important things that we can do. Some people have a tendency to neglect relationships because they don't lend themselves so easily as finances or work to being measured and seeing success. Some of these things, physical goals, financial goals, you can set targets, you can set numbers, and you can hit those goals, you can smash those goals. And there's a certain satisfaction about that. It's much harder to do that with relationships. It's much harder to see relationships as things to be attained. They aren't things to be attained. They are things to be cultivated. Like a garden, a relationship needs care, attention. Relationships don't just happen, and certainly marriage doesn't just happen on its own. Marriage needs to be worked at. So how do we get better relationships? First thing is stop looking for a relationship to complete you. Stop thinking that someone else can satisfy your deepest needs. Stop looking to other people, a relationship, for your self-worth. Stop thinking, what's in it for me? And instead of thinking, what's in it for me, start giving unconditionally. One of the wisest pieces of advice, try saying that 3 times quickly. One of the wisest pieces of advice that I had on my wedding day from my father-in-law was, put your wife first. The world will look at you and say, look at him, he's under the thumb. Oh, look at him, I see who wears the trousers in that relationship. The world will look down on you, but you will cultivate for yourself a wonderful, wonderful marriage if you put the other person first. And that does take 2 of you to do that. If your partner is not on the same page as you on that, and they're not also trying to give their all to you and give the best to you, then that is going to be tricky. That's going to require some work. But ultimately, giving yourself to your wife, to your husband, is one of the most wonderful, glorious things that you can do to ensure a satisfying and happy life and relationship. Next thing, stop keeping a record of wrongs. Might sound obvious, but don't be that person who keeps bringing up the other person's failures in whatever manner that may be. Don't be somebody who says, you remember when you did this. I'm a firm believer, if somebody apologizes, then we let it go. We cannot bring it back up. We cannot keep bringing it up and expect that relationship to be a loving relationship that grows in love. Start forgiving. When you don't forgive, it almost invariably just eats up at yourself. The other person will probably carry on, but if you don't forgive them for the wrongs that they do to you, you will be forever embittered and growing deeper and deeper into bitterness. And that's not a recipe for living life to the full. After all, that's what we're all about on this podcast, living life to the full. Moving away from one-to-one personal intimate relationships to more general relationships, because having a long and healthy life is not just about having one person that you rely on, but having a community of friends and family around you. Join a club. If you find that you need relationship, then you can reach out and join somebody who likes doing the same things as you. People, a group of people that enjoy the same things as you, whether that's collecting Pokemon cards, whether it's personal finance, cross-stitch, bowls, basketball, anything. If you join a club, you'll meet people who are on the same wavelength as you, and you can build relationships that way. Finally, we're going to finish with an action point. Call a family member. As I get older, I realize more and more calling my mum, calling my dad, some of the most important things I can do for maintaining relationship. Call a sister, call a brother, call a nephew or a niece. Reach out to someone. So there we have it. Top tips to get better relationships. Stop looking for a relationship to complete you. Stop thinking what's in it for me and start giving unconditionally. Stop keeping a record of wrongs. Start forgiving. Join a club. Call a family member. Thanks for joining me once again on this episode of Life to the Full, how we can make the most of our time here on Earth by having wonderful, fulfilling relationships. We've looked at 4 things now. We're going to bring our series to a close next time by looking at spiritual health. Now, before you say, I'm not going to tune into that episode, give it a shot. Give it a shot. If you've enjoyed the last 4, I promise you, number 5 will be just as good, if not better. Yes, once again, thanks for listening. And if you haven't already, why don't you subscribe to the podcast? There's no like button to smash as far as I'm aware on podcast apps, but you can subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. See you next time. Peace out.